When you ask a matchmaker, is our industry regulated? They'll say no. And that's what you think. And this is why I started an organization called the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, because we wanted to bring to matchmakers that there are laws and regulations that impact them everywhere in the world.
Welcome to Challenges of a Matchmaker. I'm your host, Shai Tesler, and I'm excited to have you watching today. For those who are new to the channel, Challenges of a Matchmaker is a series which we sit down with matchmakers and relationship experts to discuss the real challenges behind the work. In every episode, we explore three areas. First, awareness and coaching, helping people recognize when they actually need guidance. The second is preserving relationship, why new relationship often fell apart, and what does it take to make them last. Third is operational, the behind-the-scene challenges involved in running a matchmaking business. My guest today is Arlene Washburn. Arlene is an ethical matchmaking advocate on an international matchmaking compliance board, where she helps set global standards for the profession. She is also a founder of Love Pro Mastermind Academy and the host of Matchmaker Mentor podcast. For years, she trained matchmakers at the Matchmaker Institute in New York. Her work has touched almost every part of the matchmaking industry. Arlene, thank you so much for being here. For those who may be new to your work, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long time since we last spoke, but we've known each other for quite some time. Basically, I focus on helping professional matchmakers build ethical, scalable, and operationally sound businesses while also working to raise standards across the industry through training, compliance, education, and accreditation initiatives. I love the matchmaking world, and I want matchmakers to have success and to do it in a sustainable, ethical, and compliant way. And that's really my focus today.
Thank you. You have really an impressive background. You actually affected the entire industry, and I'm honored to have you here. So thank you.
I'm honored to be here too.
In the first section is awareness and coaching. From your experience, what are the most common challenges you see people struggle with?
Okay, so from the matchmaker perspective, the biggest struggle for a matchmaker when it comes to coaching her clients is that the matchmaker has not been trained as a coach. And I think that most daters assume that a matchmaker is a coach, and that is not the case. When I was a matchmaker, I started as a coach first, and I had a lot of training and coaching. There's methods, there's ways to get individuals to bring out their own answers. And if you're not someone who has been trained in doing so, then you should just partner with a coach and let that person do the coaching, because you might cause more harm than good. And there's, an assumption that coaching is getting feedback, for example, which is something that's part of the operational side of matchmaking. When you make introductions, you want feedback from both parties, but the feedback that then you deliver to these parties is not coaching, right? You have to learn how to coach to be able to coach. And so that would be the biggest challenge. Otherwise, you're going to create more harm than good.
If matchmakers watching this episode, what do you want to tell them?
What I would say, if you are someone who really wants to be able to provide in the case of coaching, if you really want to provide that, then get the proper training and learn about coaching and use some sort of methodology. When I was a coach, I was very science-based, because as a coach, I was able to essentially give feedback to my clients and coach them, but I could blame the research and the science. So I wasn't the bad guy. So if a person said to me, whatever dilemma they were dealing with, I can say there are studies that show XYZ. You may
Mm.
be different, and of course, people are all different, and everybody's a unicorn or a
Yeah.
snowflake. However, the majority of people in this study are in this situation. And so you can take and leave what you want from there. So it's always helpful to have some sort of foundation for the kind of coaching that you're using. There are folks that use astrology, there are folks that use numerology. And then the people who come to you are coming to you because they believe in that, and they are open to that. But use some kind of foundation for the kind of coaching and advice that you're going to give. I happen to be partial to the science because I spent 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry. So I was used to science and research, and that's what I'm attracted to.
Thank you. When you say get education, like I in the matchmaking world, I hear a lot the word attachment styles, love language. And also I start discovering this on myself, and a lot of coaches told me that I spoke with them, told me read the book Attached, read the book Attached. So I listened to it, and it's an amazing book. But is there a formal education for this? Is there a school? Is there a specific degree? How do you get certified?
This is a great question because there are people who go to college and get a degree in psychology, but may not have the skills to train or to coach people on dating or relationships. And they're two very distinctly different things, because one thing is to coach someone on how to date, how to show up on a date, how to make connections and all of that. And then there's how to be in a relationship. They're very different activities. They bring out different things. And so there are folks that are attracted to psychology degrees because they themselves need help, right? And they might go and get a psychology degree
Yeah,
about whatever trauma and maybe focus in that area. So it's really important to get the proper training for the area that you want to focus in, or you get a general training and then do a more focused thing. Now, regarding Attached, which is a great book that came out many, many years ago, I just saw Amir Levin. He happens to be from Israel. And he actually came out with a new book called Secure. And it's a great book. I highly recommend it. And he does go a little bit against what was originally written, because as he explained it in the presentation that I saw, he talked about how he had just been hurt and sort of grieving a relationship himself. And when he wrote that book with another writer who doesn't get a lot of mention, but it was two people, two doctors who wrote the book. I think his approach was more focused on, the secure is the ideal person to be with, and, the anxious you need to avoid. And that's not at all the case. So I would highly recommend anyone who's reading Attached to then read Secure, because it's going to give you a very different perspective, and it's going to help people understand that you don't have one attachment style for the rest of your life, or one attachment style at a time, because it depends on the situation that you're in, what part of you comes out. So yeah, I think it's great to read books, but it's really a surface level. You need a
yeah,
little depth to really consider yourself educated.
yeah.
In,
For sure. I will not be a therapist by reading a book,
right,
and
right.
I for sure read. I once spoke with a therapist, and she told me, like, you take avoidance, all those styles, like in every area on your life there you can be avoidant, in this you can be right. It's like it's so deep, and you need to expose all those patterns in all the situations in your life to to reveal the truth, right?
Yeah.
So is it true? It's like
It's
this?
true. Yeah, and the attachment style comes out in different situations. So you may have a secure attachment style in the workplace, and an anxious attachment style in your relationships, your romantic relationships. So it's very much situational, and there's a lot more to it than that. So I definitely encourage people not to put themselves in a box and really
Got it.
learn a little bit more. Now,
Got
I
it.
do love the framework of the Dr. Chapman with the five love languages. I think is a great book, and I do see a lot of validity to that. And it's something that you can apply not only to your romantic relationships, but your relationships at work, your relationships with your children. Everyone has a way that they like to be loved. And when I was a coach, I used to talk a lot about it because people talk about the golden rule where they say, treat people the way you want to be treated. And I believe in the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated, because the way you want to be treated may not be what they
It's
want.
not the same. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's five love languages. Everyone has their own love language. And if
Yeah.
you
And
give them what they
especially,
want, they're going to be
yeah.
happy.
And if you are in different places, you are come from the east or you come from the west, each one has like different moral codes, right?
Yeah.
It's like not everything is the same. Oh, thank you. So let's move to the like. What about preserving relationship? Like, oh, and this is interesting because every time I brought this up, I try to get more juice in this area, and I don't get a lot of information because the most answer that I hear is like, okay, they're running alone for one period together, like you let them run. But my experience when I was single and I was heavy dating app user, like it's always break on after 2 3 months, and like for my personal life, this is like what is the formula, what is like your biggest tip to give here, to professional or to the singles, whatever you choose.
On how to sustain a relationship? Is that
Yeah, especially on new relationships.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you can't have one magic bullet, right? You can't have one
Yeah, for
magic
sure,
pill.
for sure. Choose
However,
one.
but what I would say is if you approach a relationship with curiosity, and this is important because when you're curious, you ask questions, you're interested, and you show up in a very different way when you're curious. And so what do I mean by that? Let's say you're two folks coming from Israel, you're both Jewish. You can't assume that you already know this person because you have kind of a similar background, because every household is different. Everyone's raised differently. And so this is what I find sometimes happens when people think they assume certain things that they have in common. So the curiosity goes away. They just make assumptions. So always maintain that curiosity in a relationship so that you're always, interested, because people love to talk about themselves. They love to just be heard and understood. And the only way to really do that is to be curious. In the same way with matchmakers, when they're working with their clients, it's so important for them to be curious and ask the right, ask questions instead of assuming and making quick judgments and then ending up in situations where they're introducing the wrong people, for example. So to me, that's one of the top things. Now, longevity, once you're in a relationship, is to always find ways to connect. That means spending a certain number of hours in the week connecting and asking each other questions and sharing about your experiences and what you're doing. And when you find that things are starting to get a little bit boring or routine, find something interesting and exciting that you can do together, because that creates arousal. And I don't mean sexual, I mean
Mhm.
the mind is
Man,
stimulated in a different way because you're both doing something different. So if you're a couple that's been together for a long time or even a short period of time, create a bucket list of things that you want to do that neither one of you has ever done. And when things start to wane and be a little bit more routine, go to the bucket list and do that thing that neither one of you has done and do it together. And that is going to bring excitement into your relationship. and it'll change things.
I will do that. What is like, okay, so let's take the same question and say for a professional. What do you say for a professional to improve how long to stay in touch in the beginning? What is there a formula? What's your tip here?
So for the professionals, meaning the matchmaker who now has established a relationship with a client. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And the
basically,
client start dating.
sorry?
And the client start dating. Like they make a match and this is the day after the date.
Okay, well, I kind of heard two things, so I'm gonna address one real quick, and then I'll go into that. So, what is really important when someone hires a matchmaker should always have a process that has continuous connection to her client, because in most matchmaking companies, the investment is pretty significant. And people don't want to pay a matchmaker a lot of money, and then all of a sudden, radio silence. There's no communication. So I think it's really important that when a dater engages with a matchmaker and pays her money, whatever, they have to have a process. And in that process, the matchmaker should be explaining what comes next after every interaction. So in other words, you've signed your contract, you'll be receiving an invoice in the next whatever days, given rescission periods and stuff. And then after the invoice is paid, that the client gets an acknowledgement and then the next step. And so you're guiding your client every step of the way. Now, once they're in the matchmaking phase where you're making introductions, there should always be a feedback session after every introduction. The way I handled it when I was a matchmaker is that the dater received a confirmation when they were meeting a client or a database member, whatever. It would have a link to a form that the dater could fill out immediately about how the date went. And there were a series of questions, because that becomes a tracking system internally, that you know what's happening after every date. And you want the dater to fill this out immediately after, because if they go to bed and they sleep on it, their opinion is going to change, because they're not, those are fake, second guessing emotions. What you want are the real experience that the person had right after the date. And so with what I teach, I tell them, use a tracker that people complete, and then above and beyond the tracker, have a conversation, because you want the depth of what that exchange was. And what I found is that there's sometimes, very often, unfortunately, a disconnect where maybe the guy felt, oh my God, this was amazing, this was such a great date. And the woman's like, I don't want to go out with him again. He didn't ask me any questions. He wasn't interested. And so having the matchmaker in the middle helps to bridge the gap, because often a dater, especially men, they want to impress. They think that that's going to make the connection better, but it doesn't. It actually makes the person feel like they weren't heard, they were not understood. So asking more questions, and then a question about the question, etc., that type of connection works better with women. But men and women are different. We have different styles of communication and all of that. So if you have a matchmaker in the middle who's doing feedback from both parties, they can bridge that gap and get people out of their own way, and get, let's say the woman says, I don't really want to go on a second date. A matchmaker might be able to get the woman to consider a second date, because it's just helpful to give people a chance, especially because most people are terrible at first dates. So that's where the matchmaker is instrumental in getting people to continue. And I had that happen with one of the couples that I put together, that I talk about all the time, who are now happily married now more about 10 years. And she didn't want to go on a second date with him because she made an assumption about him, but I knew him well enough to get her out of her own way and get her to give this man a shot, because I knew that it was going to be a great match. They had so many things in common. And sure enough, because I was there, she went on a second date, and then they continued to date, and now they've been happily married
Oh,
for years.
it's amazing story.
And by the way, she got married for the first time at the age of 60.
Wow. This is a tough to crack.
But she was great. She was great.
It sounds like you did an amazing coaching work there, digging beliefs and letting them go to the world.
Absolutely.
So, what is the most operational challenge that matchmakers experience? What is the hardest part?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Starting with not getting any leads, for example, right? Matchmakers, if you have a professional matchmaking business, you have to consistently have people inquiring about your business so that you can help them. Well, that's always a challenge. And what you'll find is that matchmakers don't have what I call, I have a framework for every aspect of a matchmaking business. And one of those is called the revenue rhythm method, because in order for you to have consistent revenue, you have to have consistent activity. Because what you're doing today is not going to translate today, it's going to translate 3 months from now. So if you're struggling today, it means that 3 months ago, you didn't do what you needed to do. So that's a big challenge. Now, make believe you have all the clients, and now you're pulling your hair out because everything's so disorganized, because you don't have a client journey that is documented, that is followed consistently all the time. And then beyond that, that you don't have the systems. And I know you have a platform called Una, right?
Yes.
That helps matchmakers organize, because in Europe, in California, there's some strict privacy policy laws where your data needs to exist somewhere. You need to understand where you have that data, because this is a very, very complicated industry, because you're dealing with people's important identifiable data. It has to be maintained a certain way. You have to be able to delete it if they ask, etc. So that's a big, big issue. And it goes on and on. Even the sales process, not having a proper sales process on how you handle from lead to actually working with the client. That those are all frameworks, and we teach that at the Love Pro Mastermind Academy, because if a person wants to be a true professional, they need to have a process, they need to have systems, and they need to be consistent in order to have success and then help more people.
I believe it's true to any business. When I start contacting and reaching out at Una like two years ago, and now I read books, I learn, I improve all the time, and I realized that I wasn't organized in the beginning. And then I realized that, oh my goodness, I had this lead, she told me speak with me in 2 months, and it got lost. It got lost, and I had an opportunity to get, someone to work with me. And I realized that I must be organized. It's a must. And what?
No, please go ahead.
No, and I'm going to do all my work inside Una as well, which is like everything is going to be there. What do you want to say?
Well, I just think you bring up such a great point, right? Because sometimes people think they need more leads, and what they really need is follow up. Because today, if a lead comes to you, it may take you up to 12 follow ups before they actually do something. And if you think that you're bothering them, you're not. Because until someone says yes or no, they're in limbo. And that limbo could mean that life got in the way, they're busy, they see your message and like, oh yeah, I got to get back to them. And I mean, think about how often you yourself do that, right? Where you're like, yeah, I got to do that. And then you get distracted. So you're doing people a favor. Instead of thinking you're bothering them, you're doing them a favor by following up. And then when you get to the place of yes or no, that concludes that engagement as far as whether or not you're going to work with someone. And so it's
Yeah,
sometimes not a lead problem, it's a follow-up problem, which falls on the
for
practitioner
sure,
about their
for sure,
professionalism.
for sure. I also learned I tell someone don't tell you stop. It's like how do you say it? It's in the limbo, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, let's talk about ethics and compliance. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How does a matchmaker knows that now you bring that, it sounds so big. How does a matchmaker know that she's ethical, that she's following the compliance? What does it mean if she's not?
This is such a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked it because our industry has largely been under the radar. It's been more traditional with certain communities, like in the Jewish community, in the Indian community, and others, where it was just a low key thing. And in the Jewish community, you would only pay the matchmaker when there was a success, for the most part. Now that this has become a profession, and it needs to be because there is a loneliness epidemic around the world.
Yeah,
It was identified a few years ago by the Surgeon General in the United States. I had been talking about it 3 or 4 years prior to that, and post COVID, it's only gotten worse. And I think part of it has to do with technology. People think they're connected because they're talking to a screen, but that's not a real connection. And so there's a loneliness epidemic. So we need professionals. We need an army of matchmaking professionals out there doing this work. And it's become very mainstream. They're doing movies and shows about matchmakers. What happens with that is once it becomes known, then you need to really toe the line, because when you ask a matchmaker, is our industry regulated? They'll say no. And that's what you think. And this is why I started an organization called the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, because we wanted to bring to matchmakers that there are laws and regulations that impact them everywhere in the world. When we talk about Israel, for example, if you run a database in Israel, you're supposed to register it with the
yeah,
government. Most people don't know that, right? So every place has a different law. In America, every different states have different jurisdictions. A jurisdiction means that in the state of New York, matchmaking is done a certain way. In California, is a different way. Or the laws that apply to each of those matchmakers are different. Here's the kicker, and this is why it's so important. Today, matchmakers are doing business on Zoom, which means that a matchmaker could be in Israel and be working with clients in New York. However, the matchmaker in Israel who's taking a client in New York has to abide by the laws in New York. In the same way that a New York matchmaker who's working with a client in London has to abide by GDPR rules, right? If they're taking clients in London. And most matchmakers are not attuned to that because no one had been talking about this until we started the organization. And I know because I was a matchmaker and I didn't know anything about this. And I was the CEO of the Matchmaking Institute, and I was training matchmakers way back when, going back to 2014. I didn't know these things because no one ever mentioned it to me. And so if we want to professionalize this industry, if we want people to take matchmakers seriously, then you need to follow the laws. And the last thing I'll say about that is that the matchmaking world has grown exponentially in terms of the price points that they charge. So if a matchmaker's charging 25,000, 50,000, 100,000, even 250,000, I mean, the numbers are wild, not just in America, around the world. With that kind of mainstream, awareness, with those prices, there's a lot more scrutiny. So when you're charging that kind of money, you definitely need to act like a professional, follow the laws that apply to you, and be ethical, because we all went into this to help people. It was not about the money. We went into it because we wanted to help daters be successful. And then you get caught up on the money, and then you forget what was your why? Why were you getting into this? Because you wanted to help people be successful in relationships. So that requires professionalism, ethics, and compliance. I get
Well,
very passionate about this topic.
yeah, I know, and we talked about it a couple times before. Like it sounds like a really deep area, and I guess there is so many checklists inside it. And what? As a matchmaker, I need to get a lawyer. What do I need to do as a matchmaker to make sure that I'm compliant and I'm following the the legal rules?
Great question. I'm so glad that you asked it, because I put myself in the shoes of a matchmaker, someone who's really wonderful, who really cares about their clients, and then they hear me say these things, right? And they're like freaking out, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" Well, it's very simple. We started an organization, the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, to support the matchmakers, because you have enough to deal with your clients and to run a business. So when you come to us, what we do is a full audit of your business in terms of ethics and compliance. You submit all of your information and we audit it. If you have any areas that require remediation, we give you a report, and then you fix those things, and then you come back and we accredit you. An accreditation is, we're a third party organization. We aren't matchmakers. I have lawyers and myself who happens to have a lot of knowledge about the industry, a lot of knowledge about the laws, and we track all of the laws around the globe. We're not lawyers. We're not offering legal services, right? Because this is an auditing company. We audit what you're doing and we help you be compliant. We're not policing you. We're not going after you. But once you are part of our organization and you have gone through an accreditation, you're also signing an agreement to abide by this, to continue to operate this way, right? And what does this do? It helps you, because if you have a third party, independent party helping and auditing your work, God forbid you end up in a situation where you're in court. Well, you can demonstrate to a judge or a mediator or somebody, look, we've made efforts to be compliant. Yes, somebody made a mistake here. They treat you very differently when you act like a professional and you make every effort to do the right thing and maybe something happens, versus someone who does nothing. You have not done anything. You're not following the regulations. You're just out there in the wild, wild west. You're going to get treated very differently from a judge or a mediator or arbitrator, because they see that you have no care. And this is why I wanted to create this organization as an international one, because it applies worldwide. And again, like I said, with Zoom, people are doing business on Zoom, which means they can do business with anyone. So it needed to be an international one. So yeah, the answer to your question is, come to us, we'll help you, and then you could feel more at ease in what you're doing, because you know that you've gone through a third party audit from people like myself who actually know and understand the industry. And I'm not a matchmaker, so I don't compete with my clients like other organizations that have, their own competitors running them. That's not what we do here. We're all independent. We're not in the matchmaking field. I'm just helping people. That's what I would say.
No, it sounds complete. Now, let me question about it. Is this means that if I come to you, to your service, so I get a one-stop shop? It means like I don't need to go to other places. You have the lawyers. You help me create a contract. You tell me what to do. I don't come to you and then I need to take the documents and go to someone else and then come back. It means that everything is under your umbrella.
I'm so glad you asked that. So what we have are strategic partnerships with external. When I say the lawyer, for example, is a strategic partner. And let me explain what that is. That's an independent business. When I started the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, I knew that people were going to hit roadblocks when it came to their contracts, because most matchmakers, and I hate to say this, are operating with non-compliant contracts. Because if you have one contract and you're using it with everyone everywhere, that contract is not going to be compliant. I could almost assure it 100%. But I knew the roadblock would be that. So I've brought in a strategic partner that I've trained on the operations of matchmaking. Because if you go to an attorney, like there's real estate attorneys, there's business attorneys, I have a good friend who works with the oil companies. They specialize. You know why? Because they understand the business. When a matchmaker goes to a lawyer and the lawyer doesn't understand the matchmaking world, he's
Sure.
not going to give you a good contract, because a contract is not just the legal ease, there's also the operational pieces of a contract. How do you run your operation? And this is particularly difficult when you're a new matchmaker, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to ask for, and therefore you're going to an attorney to create a contract for you that is not a good fit for your business. So I needed to bring in attorneys that I trained on the operations of matchmaking. However, we do not offer any legal services. You have to go directly to them, pay them directly, but they're going to be more efficient, and therefore it's going to cost you less, because now you're dealing with someone who knows what questions to ask
Yeah.
so that they can give you a compliant contract. And
Yeah.
that to me is huge, because a lot of folks are not going to know what questions to ask. In fact, I would say that the lawyers, these particular lawyers, are going to know more what to ask you about your business than you
Yeah.
know yourself, that you haven't even thought about, because you don't know about contracts, like most people don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like going to a lawyer who specializes in real estate and tell him I have some other areas that
About your divorce. Yeah.
about divorce. Yeah, like exactly. What is going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like I'm creating a new type of lawyer, which is the matchmaking lawyer, because I do think that our matchmaking world is going to turn very similar to the real estate world, where you have realtors everywhere. You're gonna have
Well,
matchmakers everywhere. If God,
I'm looking forward for that day. I'm looking forward for that. I was single so much time. There's so much to learn and grow for matchmakers and professionals and experts, and I wish I knew this earlier.
absolutely. Okay. I always want to hear what matchmakers are struggling with, so that I can help solve it for them. Like help them, or teach them how to not have that problem.
What I encounter, like there's this, and we are going to take all these feedbacks, everything, your interview, everyone interview. I'm summarizing everything, and we are going to develop all the features that matchmaker are missing, and then like when they are ready, I'm going to deploy them and publish them, because there is a lot of pain areas. I did researches that are not solved in the
Yep.
current CRMs.
I love that.
And we are
Well, by
going
the
to solve all of it.
Yeah, that's very exciting, because I think anything that can be systematized really helps these people, because they are having a bunch of conversations. And to your point, like a matchmaker will say, and this is what we were talking about earlier, where you get paid a lot of money and then you disappear and you go silent, but you're actually working, you're actually reaching
Yeah,
out to people, you're actually doing things, but your client doesn't know that, which is why there needs to be a communication cadence where you establish with your client how often you're going to talk to them, and give them a report, because even when you're onboarding a client, they need to understand that you do all the first dates, that you're the one interviewing everyone and finding out
yeah,
everything you need to find out about them, and doing all the quote unquote vetting, right? In order for you to only bring forward qualified people. So this is not a numbers game for your client. They're actually showing up on dates with people who are qualified to meet them. But the matchmaker is
yeah,
doing all the first dates. But if you don't tell your client what you're doing, how do they know? And the
yeah,
other thing is, technology like yours will track all of that, right? Because you need to have
yeah,
an audit trail of who are you talking to. That needs to be documented somewhere, and a CRM is a perfect place. Everything should live in your CRM. Why? Because
everything.
if a client complains and they think that you're not doing any work, there's a timestamp on every transaction, and it should
Yeah.
be done. Your note taking, all of that should be done immediately, not
And
later,
automatically.
and automatically. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why this is so important. And also, God forbid you have to give a refund, whether you have a refund policy or not, and everybody
Mm.
should. How do you know how much to refund? Because you've done some work. Well, the only way you're going to know is by documenting in your CRM
Yeah.
every step by step of everything that you do. So now you can go back
Yeah.
and show this is all the work that's been done. The refund then becomes a strategic structural thing, not something that you pull out of thin air. So
And
it's
something that the lawyers you work with for sure do, right? It's already part of the process, probably.
well, I mean, it's not a lawyer thing. If you have to give a refund, it's more of an education thing. So I do teach this in the Love Pro Mastermind Academy. I teach matchmakers about accrual of the money that they're paid. So often, matchmakers are paid a lump sum of money in advance. Every stage of your business should be laid out where you know exactly what you're doing when you're doing it. And therefore, you know what part of that money you've actually earned. And it's like accrual accounting. So when you earn the money is when it becomes your money. Otherwise, it's sitting in the bank somewhere. Because if you have to give a refund and you've gone ahead and spent all that money, you're going to have to go mortgage your house to give that money back. So
Yeah.
especially with the prices and what they are today. So I'm a big believer that even if you're paid in full upfront, that you should be accruing the money that you've earned. And if you need more money, go get another client. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
And this
No,
is what we teach at the Love Pro Master.
actually, it's really good to hear it, and it's really that if a matchmaker has such process that she actually tracks where she did the work and what, I love it.
I mean, this is why I was so passionate about putting this training together, because when I went into matchmaking with, it was very much my heart of helping daters. When you've gone through your own struggles and everything, you really want to help. And I think that's a great motivator. But once you start a business, it's so important to have a process and a system that you can quantify and justify, because that's what makes you a true professional. And we have to end this Cupid mentality that's out there. Like, oh, I have this intuition. I just know how to put people together. If people are paying you money, it's the Cupid has to stay on one side and the profession has to be on the other, and they have to come together. Because if you're just going to stay in the Cupid mode, you're going to have problems that are going to show up in court. And that's what I'm trying to help matchmakers avoid: to run a business like a professional with your heart, yes, but also with your methods, and let people buy into your methods. Because the truth is I brag about that client all the time who got married for the first time at the age of 60, but that wasn't me. That was them. I cannot be responsible for the outcome of a relationship. That is only something that can happen between two people that has nothing to do with the matchmaker. All I can do is follow my process and do the vetting and do all the things that we agreed upon and bring forward qualified people. But if you're a self-saboteur, if you're terrible with relationships, I can bring you the most perfect person that I think is going to be a match,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
know.
not going to work out. So matchmakers can't really take credit for those things. And when they talk about their success rates, I always worry about that, because there's a lot of laws that also impact success rates and things like that. That's a whole other topic. We're gonna have to do another session.
Last question. If there is one operational lesson that you have learned the hard way that others could benefit from, what would it be?
The biggest lesson that I can tell professional matchmakers, irrespective of how long you've been in the business, is to always be learning. What I know now compared to what I knew 15 years ago when I got into this business is night and day. And if you close yourself off, as I've seen many matchmakers do, they think, well, here's how we do it, and this is what we do. And don't look over there. don't look at this matchmaker, don't share anything. It is the biggest mistake. Learn. Continuous matchmaker education is a requirement when you become accredited. Why? Because laws change, practices change, society changes, everything changes. And if you set it and forget it, you're not going to be successful. So always be learning. That is the biggest operational lesson that I can tell you, is that nothing should be done once. Everything has to be revisited and looked at, and continuous learning is going to help you keep up with what's going on. AI, technology, all of
Yeah, yeah.
it. You have to continue to learn.
Wow, this session I learned so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. If people wants to find more about you, where they can find you?
First of all, Shai, thank you so much for inviting me. We've been talking for years now. I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you're now doing these shows to help matchmakers. If anyone wants to find me, the best place, if you're on social media, I'm on everything under Arlene Washburn. LinkedIn is my social media home away from home. I always respond very quickly there. And if you're interested in training, go to the lovepromastermind.com and take a look at what we're doing. It doesn't matter if you've been a matchmaker or have never been a matchmaker. We have someone right now in our program that's been a matchmaker for 26 years.
Wow.
And then we have people who are just thinking about going into it, and from all walks of life. I've had lawyers, doctors, guidance school counselors, people who came from big matchmaking companies that are starting their own. Always be learning. So hit us up on any of those channels.
Awesome. And I will put all the links to find you below. Thank you so much, Arlene.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.